Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies, and this is Demit from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. Demit, a modern, American, and wholly indefensible corruption of the technical word demit, as the use of this corrupt form is beginning to be very prevalent among American Masonic writers. It is proper that we should inquire which is the correct word, demit or demit. For almost a century and a half, the Masonic world has been content, in its technical language, to use the word demit. But within a few years, a few admirers of neologisms, men who are always ready to believe that what is old cannot be good, and that new fashions are always the best, have sought to make a challenge in the well-established word, and by altering the E in the first syllable into an I, they make another word, demit, which they assert is the right one. It is simply a question of orthography, and must be settled first by reference to usage, and then to the etymology, to discover which of the words sustains, by its derivation, the true meaning which is intended to be conveyed. It is proper, however, to premise that although in the 17th century Sir Thomas Browne used the word demit as a verb meaning to depress, and Bishop Hall used demit as signifying to send away, yet both words are omitted by all the early lexicographers. Neither of them is to be found in Phillips in 1706, nor in Blunt in 1707, nor in Bailey in 1732. Johnson and Sheridan, of a still later date, have inserted in their dictionaries demit, but not demit. But Walker, Richardson, and Webster give both words, but only as verbs. The verb to demit or to demit may be found, but never the noun, a demit or a demit, as a noun substantive. This word, however it may be spelled, is unknown to the general language and is strictly a technical expression peculiar to Freemasonry. As a Masonic technicality, we must then discuss it. And first, as to its meaning, Dr. Oliver, who omits demit in his Dictionary of Symbolic Masonry, defines demit thus: a Mason is said to demit from the order when he withdraws from all connection with it. It will be seen that he speaks of it here only as a verb, and makes no reference to its use as a noun. McCoy, in his Encyclopedia, omits demit, but defines demit thus: from the Latin demito, to permit to go, the act of withdrawing from membership. To say nothing of the incorrectness of this definition, to which reference will hereafter be made, there is in it a violation of the principles of language which is worthy of note. No rule is better settled than that which makes the verb and the noun derived from it have the same relative signification. Thus, to discharge means to dismiss. A discharge means a dismission. To approval means to express liking. An approval means an expression of liking. To remit means to relax. A remission means a relaxation. And so with 1,000 other instances. Now, according to this rule, if to demit means to permit to go, then a demit should mean a permission to go. The withdrawal is something subsequent and consequent, but it may never take place. According to McCoy's definition of the verb, the granting of a demit does not necessarily lead to the conclusion that the Mason who received it has left the lodge. He has only been permitted to do so. This is contrary to the universally accepted definition of the word. Accordingly, when he comes to define the word as a noun, he gives it the true meaning, which, however, does not agree with his previous definition as a verb. In instituting the inquiry, which of these two words is the true one, we must first look to the general usage of Masonic writers, for after all, the rule of Horace holds good, that in the use of words we must be governed by custom or usage, whose arbitrary sway words and the forms of language must obey. If we shall find that the universal usage of Masonic writers until a very recent date, has been to employ the form Demit, then we are bound to believe that it is the correct form, notwithstanding a few writers have very recently sought to intrude the form Demit upon us. Now, how stands the case? The first time that we find the word Demit used is in the second edition of Anderson's Constitution, 1738, page 153. There it is said that on the 25th of November, 1723, it was agreed that if a master of a particular lodge is disposed, or demits, the senior warden shall forthwith fill the master's chair. The word continued in use as a technical word in the Masonry of England for many years. In the editions of the Constitutions, published in 1756, page 311, the passage just quoted is again recited, and the word demit is used, and the word demit is again employed in the fourth edition of the Constitutions, published in 1767, page 345. In the second edition of Dermont's Reason, published in 1764, I have not the first, page 52, and the third edition, published in 1778, page 58. The word demit is employed. Oliver, it will be seen, uses it in his dictionary published in 1853, but the word seems to have been obsolete in England, and to resign is now constantly used by English Masonic writers in the place of to demit. In America, however, the word has been and continues to be in universal use, and has always been spelled until very recently, demit. Thus we find it used by Thornhill, Manual, 1845, page 59. Morris, Code of Masonic Law, 1856, page 259. By Hubbard in 1851. By Chase, Digest, 1859, page 104. By Mitchell, Masonic History, volume 2, page 556 and 592. And by all the Grand Lodges, whose proceedings I have examined up to the year 1860 and probably beyond that date. On the contrary, the word demit is of very recent origin and has been used only within a few years. Usage, therefore, both English and American, is clearly in favor of demit and demit as an interloper, and ought to be consigned to the tomb of the Capulets. And now we are to inquire whether this usage is sustained by the principles of etymology. First, let us obtain a correct definition of the word. To demit in Masonic language means simply to resign. The Mason who demits from his lodge resigns from it. The word is used in the exact sense. For instance, in the Constitution of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin, where it is said, "No brother shall be allowed to demit from any lodge unless for the purpose of uniting with some other." That is to say, no brother shall be allowed to resign from any lodge. Now, what are the respective meanings of demit and demit in ordinary language? There the words are found to be entirely different in signification. To demit is derived first from the Latin dimitri, through the French dimitra. In Latin, the prefix particle d has the weight of down, added to the verb mitri, to send. It signifies to let down from an elevated position to a lower. Thus, Caesar used it in this very sense when, in describing the storming of Illyricum, he says that the Roman soldiers did not let themselves down, that is, descend from the top of the wall to the level ground. The French, looking to this reference to a descent from a higher to a lower position, made their verb, se demit, used in a reflective sense, signify to give up a post, office, or occupation, that is to say, to resign it. And thence the English use of the word is reducible, which makes to demit signify to resign. We have another word in our language also derived from dementra, and in which the same idea of resignation is apparent. It is the word demise, which was originally used only to express a royal death. The old maxim was that The king never dies. So, instead of saying the death of the king, they said the demise of the king, thereby meaning his resignation of the crown to his successor. The word is now applied more generally, and we speak of the demise of Mr. Pitt or any other person. To demit is derived from the Latin dimitre. The prefix particle de or dis has the effect of off from, and hence dimitre means to send away. Thus, Terence uses it to express the meaning of dismissing or sending away an army. Both words are now obsolete in the English language. They were formerly used, but in the different senses already indicated. Thus, Holinshed employs demit to signify a surrender, yielding up, or resignation of a franchise. Bishop Hall uses demit to signify sending away of a servant by his master. Demit as a noun is not known in good English. The correlative nouns of the verbs to demit and to demit are demission and dimission. A demit is altogether a Masonic technicality and is, moreover, an Americanism of very recent usage. It is then evident that to demit is the proper word, and that to use to demit is to speak and write incorrectly. When a Mason demits from a lodge, we mean that he resigns from a lodge, because to demit means to resign. But what does anyone mean when he says that a Mason demits from a lodge? To demit means, as we have seen, to send away. Therefore, he demits from the lodge is equivalent to saying he sends away from the lodge, which of course is not only bad English, but sheer nonsense. If demit is to be used at all, as it is an active, transitive verb, it must be used only in that form, and we must either say that a lodge demits a Mason, or that a Mason is demeted by his lodge. I think I have discovered the way in which this blunder first arose. Robert Morris, in his Code of Masonic Law, page 289, has the following passage. A demit, technically considered, is the act of withdrawing, and applies to the lodge and not to the individual. A Mason cannot demit in the strict sense, but the lodge may demit or dismiss him. It is astonishing how the author of this passage could have crowded into so brief a space so many violations of grammar, law, and common sense. First, to demit means to withdraw, and then this withdrawal is made the act of the lodge and not of the individual, as if the lodge withdrew the member instead of the member withdrawing himself. And immediately afterwards, seeing the absurdity of this doctrine, and to make the demission the act of the lodge, he changes the signification of the word and makes demit mean to dismiss. Certainly, it is impossible to discuss the law of Masonic demission when such contrary meanings are given to the word in one and the same paragraph. But certain wiseacres, belonging probably to that class who believe that there is always improvement and change, seizing upon this latter definition of Morris, that to demit means to dismiss, and seeing that this was a meaning which the word never had, and, from its derivation, from Dimitri, never could have, changed the word from demit to demit, which really does have the meaning of sending away or dismissing. But as the Masonic act of demission does not mean a dismissal from the lodge, because that would be expulsion, but simply a resignation, the word demit cannot properly be applied to the act. A Mason demits from the lodge. He resigns. He takes out his demit, a strictly technical expression and altogether confined to this country. He asks for and receives an acceptance of his resignation. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.